Good evening to all the beautiful people tuning in. I'm here to help you sleep. Please support me by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I'm also curious to know where you're watching from and at what time, so drop a comment below. Are you ready? Let's start with the first story.
The title of the story.
He gasped and slammed the car into gear, hoping the engine would start, but it didn't. The woman was closer now, and as the seconds ticked by, she seemed to be getting closer, yet staying just out of reach. Suddenly, the radio, which had been silent, crackled to life with a faint whisper. Whisper. Leave now. The voice whispered, trembling, as though speaking through a broken connection. You can't leave. You shouldn't be here. Mark felt a cold shiver snake down his spine. His breath caught in his throat, and he turned back to the rearview mirror, only to find the woman inches from his window. Her breath fogged the glass, her thin, ghostly fingers gently tapping against it, leaving smudges behind. No, this can't be happening, he whispered, but his voice came out weak, tremulous. The forest seemed to close in around him, as his car shuddered violently, as if struggling against something unseen, something ancient. His mind raced. Was he hallucinating? Was this all just a figment of his fear? But the knocking continued, faster, louder, more frantic. Without thinking, he threw open the door, but the moment his foot hit the ground, something grabbed him, cold, clammy fingers wrapping around his wrist, pulling him back. The woman's face, now fully visible, was inches from his. Her breath fogged the glass, her thin, ghostly fingers gently tapping against it, leaving smudges behind. No, this can't be happening. He whispered, but his voice came out weak, tremulous. The forest seemed to close in around him as his car shuddered violently, as if struggling against something unseen, something ancient. His mind raced. Was he hallucinating? Was this all just a figment of his fear? But the knocking continued, faster, louder, more frantic. Without thinking, he threw open the door, but the moment his foot hit the ground, something grabbed him. Cold, clammy fingers wrapping around his wrist, pulling him back. The woman's face, now fully visible, was inches from his. Her breath moved, whispering something he couldn't quite hear, her breath like a cold draft. Then it happened. The road, the very earth beneath his feet, seemed to tremble. The woman's face twisted in anguish, her hands clawing at him, but she didn't pull him in. No, she was pushing him away. The sound of her whisper was deafening now, like a storm roaring in his ears. Don't stay. The words were clearer now, but they weren't words of threat. It was a plea. Mark stumbled backward, breathless, as the woman faded back into the darkness. The wind picked up, howling through the trees, and in that moment, the lights of his car flickered back on. The road was quiet again. The woman was gone. Shaking and disoriented, Mark jumped into his car, his hands trembling as he sped away, never once looking back. But the road had already left its mark. The next morning, Mark returned home, but as he stepped into his apartment, something was different. The air was heavier, and there, on his kitchen counter, a faded, worn-out photograph of a woman standing by a car on a dark road. It was Eleanor, but Mark had never seen the picture before. The knock echoed through his mind as he stared at the photo. He wasn't sure if it was the beginning of a new nightmare, or if he had just become part of the road's twisted legend. Either way, he was never truly leaving Black Hollow.
The haunted road of Black Hollow. The night was thick with a chill, the air heavy with the scent of wet leaves and moss. Mark had heard the stories of Black Hollow Road for years. Who hadn't? Every local knew that you didn't drive down it after sunset, and for good reason. It wasn't just the twisted, barely visible path that winded through the dense forest. It was the things that happened to you if you dared to enter. Creaking doors, flickering headlights, and strange knocks on the window. Every story felt exaggerated, but they all contained the same chilling core. Those who went in never came out the same. Some came back shaking, their minds broken. Others, well, no one really knew. But Mark was different. He was a man of logic, of reason. He wasn't some naive local scared of shadows. He had his car, his playlist, and an open mind. And so he decided to drive through Black Hollow, debunking the myth once and for all. At 2 a.m., he turned on to the narrow, empty road, the wheels of his car crunching over the gravel. The forest stretched out on either side, black and silent. There was nothing but the hum of his engine and the distant hoot of an owl. For the first 10 minutes, everything seemed normal. Then, the headlights flickered. Mark cursed under his breath, swatting at the dashboard. "Cheap piece of junk," he muttered, trying to adjust the controls. But the lights didn't come back on. Instead, the road ahead turned darker, an oppressive shadow consuming the windshield. The dim glow from the dashboard illuminated his face, casting a ghostly pallor on his skin. He slowed down, nerves suddenly prickling at the back of his neck. The road was straight ahead, but a feeling of isolation crept in, the stillness making his heart race. It was as though the forest was watching, waiting. And then it came. The knock. It wasn't loud, not at first. Just a soft tap against the glass, like a delicate fingertip brushing the glass. Mark froze. His eyes darted to the side mirror, catching only the movement of the trees. His grip tightened on the steering wheel, his heart skipping a beat. Another knock, this time closer, more urgent. Mark's eyes shot to the rearview mirror. At first, he saw nothing, just the dark road behind him. But as his pulse quickened, he swore he saw something moving, something flickering in the distance. It was a woman. Her figure, thin and almost transparent, emerged from the blackness like a shadow in a nightmare. Her pale face was barely visible, but her eyes, those eyes were fixated on him, her hollow stare pulling him into her gaze.
The title of the story:
The Ghostly Road of Whispering Pines. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, casting the small town of Chesterton into a cold, amber twilight. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, heavy with the coming chill of night. The last of the day's warmth had slipped away, leaving a quiet unease hanging over the streets. At the edge of the town, where the pavement gave way to the darkened woods, was Whispering Pines.
The road wasn't much of a road at all, just a narrow, winding trail that slithered through the towering pines. It was the kind of road people whispered about in hushed tones at the town's single diner, in grocery store aisles, and among the children who dared one another to walk its length after dark. The locals knew better than to go near it, especially once the sun went down. No one ever spoke about it without a shadow of apprehension creeping into their voice. Not after what had happened years ago. Not after the accident. That's what they all called it. The accident. A tragic, senseless crash that took the lives of a young couple, their bodies found twisted and broken in a crumpled car at the edge of the pines. Rumor had it, the wreck wasn't just a result of a failed brake or a careless driver. It was something more. People said the spirits of the dead had been lingering ever since, trapped between the trees. It wasn't just a road anymore. It was cursed. Evelyn Monroe had always been the curious type, the kind of person who had to see things for herself, even when others warned her against it. And when she moved to Chesterton only a few weeks ago, it wasn't the town itself that piqued her interest. No, it was Whispering Pines. She'd heard the stories, the chilling tales about the whispers that drifted out from the trees, voices that beckoned and murmured secrets no one wanted to hear. It was enough to make her feel a pull, a strong, inexplicable curiosity that only grew with each passing day. So on this particular evening, as the first stars began to twinkle above the trees, Evelyn decided to take a walk. She told herself it was for the fresh air, but she knew deep down that it was something else entirely. It was a challenge, a test of her own courage. As she approached the entrance of the road, her hairs on the neck stood on end. The street lights flickered weakly, as if even they were hesitant to illuminate the path before her. The air, cool and still, smelled of pine needles and something sharper, like ozone, as if a storm were approaching. Evelyn hesitated for a moment, but only for a moment. She was already too deep in her resolve. The first steps on the gravel crunched underfoot, each sound piercing the silence like a hammer striking an anvil. She looked up, watching the towering pine trees loom over her, their long, crooked branches swaying gently in the wind. It was unnaturally quiet. Not a single bird call or insect buzzed, only the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional distant creak of a branch above. Her heart was pounding in her chest as she ventured further down the road, the narrow trail swallowed by the darkness. The whispers, soft at first, drifted to her ears, indistinguishable but unmistakable. They seemed to come from the very trees themselves, curling around her, calling her name. Evelyn! The voice was faint, but clear enough to make her stop dead in her tracks. A cold chill swept through the air, the kind that seemed to seep into her bones. She turned quickly, expecting to see someone, but there was no one, just the thick, oppressive forest. Her breath came out in shallow gasps, her heartbeat quickening.
"Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling, though she couldn't explain why. There was no answer, just the wind shifting in the branches above. Evelyn pressed on, though her steps grew slower. The whispers were growing louder now, wrapping around her, almost rhythmic in their cadence. She couldn't make out the words, but they felt alive, as if the forest itself was speaking to her. The wind picked up, howling through the pines, sending a shiver down her spine. She pulled her jacket tighter, trying to shake off the feeling that the very trees were closing in on her. What was that? There was movement in the corner of her vision, a blur of shadow darting between the trunks of the trees. Her heart leapt in her chest. She turned quickly, but again, nothing was there. Her pulse raced as she tried to make sense of what she had seen. It was too dark to make out any details, but it felt wrong, like something was just out of reach, just beyond her understanding. The whispers seemed to be growing more distinct now, more pressing. They were no longer random murmurs, but words, hushed, urgent, voices. "Come closer." She froze. The sound wasn't coming from the trees anymore. It was coming from somewhere else, somewhere deep within the forest. It was the voice of someone, no, something, asking her to come closer. Her legs moved of their own accord, her mind paralyzed by the compulsion to follow. She was walking before she even realized it, her feet dragging her further into the darkness. The path was barely visible now, the faintest outline of the gravel trail lost to the shadows. A sense of unease clawed at her chest, but it was as though her body no longer belonged to her. It moved without her permission, drawn toward the call of the whispers. Then she saw them. Shadows, figures moving among the trees. Their outlines were indistinct, fuzzy like smoke, but their eyes, they burned with a cold, knowing light. She stumbled backward, a scream catching in her throat, but no sound escaped. The figures seemed to lean closer, their outlines blurring into the mist. "You shouldn't have listened." The whisper curled around her mind, growing louder with every passing second. Panic surged through her, but her legs refused to obey. She was rooted to the spot, unable to tear herself away. The air grew colder still, her breath forming visible clouds in the damp night. And then the whispers, they changed. "You belong to us now." The ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble. She tried to turn, to run, but her body moved like it was encased in lead. The shadows surrounded her now, their shapes clear, their faces twisted in agony. And she realized, with a sickening clarity, that she was no longer alone. She wasn't just seeing them. She was becoming one of them. A gust of wind tore through the trees, icy and sharp. The figures closed in, and the last thing Evelyn heard was a cacophony of whispers merging into one final, guttural voice. "Welcome home." The next morning, the town awoke to the same quiet routine. The diner buzzed with soft chatter. The sun rose lazily over the horizon, and the people of Chesterton went about their lives as they always did. But no one noticed the figure that stood frozen at the edge of whispering pines. The pale face of a woman, her eyes wide with terror, her lips moving slowly, whispering words that no one could hear. And as the wind swept through the pines, the whispers continued. They were louder now. They were never going to stop.
The title of the story: The Road of Lost Souls. It was on the edge of winter, when the first biting winds of the season had begun to weave through the small town of Harrow, that Adrian first heard the tale of the Road of Lost Souls. The road was as infamous as it was avoided, known only to those brave or foolish enough to speak of it, but it was a mystery Adrian couldn't resist. He was a journalist, young and eager to make a name for himself, hungry for the stories that others feared to tell. One evening, after a long day of interviews and scribbled notes, Adrian found himself in the local tavern, his eyes scanning the quiet faces of the patrons, all staring into their mugs, avoiding his gaze. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong about this place, about the people who lived here. But the chill that had crept into his bones seemed to be the only thing keeping him alert. "You're new here, aren't you?" An old man, his face lined with years of regret, said as he slid into the seat across from Adrian. "Let me give you a piece of advice. Stay away from the road." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "The road? What road?" "The road of lost souls," the old man whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "No one who goes there at night ever comes back the same. Some don't come back at all." The hairs on the back of Adrian's neck stood up. "And you believe in all this nonsense?" The man looked into Adrian's eyes, and for a moment there was nothing but silence between them. Then he spoke again, quieter now. "There are things in this world that can't be explained. If you must go, remember this: you can't save them. Don't try." Adrian smiled politely, dismissing the warning as superstitious rambling. But as the night wore on, the conversation gnawed at him, the strange look in the old man's eyes lingering long after the tavern had emptied out. His curiosity grew, pushing aside the doubts in his mind. The road had become an obsession. The next evening, just after the sun had dipped below the horizon, Adrian packed his camera gear and set out for the infamous road. The air was thick with mist as he drove through the snow-blanketed hills, the headlights of his car cutting through the dark like a knife. The road was said to be long abandoned, a forgotten relic of history, but the fact that it was so close to the town only made it more irresistible to Adrian. As he reached the entrance to the road, the temperature dropped even further, and the world around him seemed to go still. The only sound was the soft crunch of snow beneath his boots as he stepped out of the car, the wind biting at his face. The road itself was narrow and overgrown, the trees on either side looming like silent sentinels. There was something unnatural about it, a weight in the air that made Adrian's skin crawl, but he shook it off. This was his story.
Adrian began walking, his camera clicking as he captured images of the overgrown road and the skeletal trees that seemed to claw at the sky. The deeper he went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became.
The whispers, faint and indistinct, seemed to ride the wind, always just out of reach. He paused, straining to listen, but there was nothing. Only the soft groan of the wind as it moved through the barren landscape. Suddenly, a light appeared in the distance, flickering like a distant lantern. Adrian's pulse quickened. This was what he had come for. He sprinted toward it, his breath coming in quick gasps as the mist closed in around him, thickening by the second. The light grew brighter, but there was something off about it. It didn't seem natural. It swayed in an eerie rhythm, like a flame caught in the wind, but there was no wind. When he reached the source of the light, he found nothing but a shadowy figure standing motionless in the snow. It was a woman, her face obscured by a heavy, tattered shawl, but her presence was unmistakable. Adrian's breath caught in his throat. "Are you lost?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly, despite his attempt to sound confident. The woman slowly turned to face him, and Adrian felt the temperature plummet even further. Her eyes, dark and hollow, stared into him like two empty pits. "Please, help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. Adrian felt his stomach churn, an unsettling feeling gnawing at his insides. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. "I can help," he said, instinctively reaching out, but the woman stepped back, her form flickering like a mirage. The light around her flared and then vanished, leaving nothing but the oppressive silence of the road. For a moment, Adrian stood frozen in place, his mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. And then the whispers began again, closer this time, sharper. He spun around, but the road was empty. No woman, no light, no sign of anything. But the whispers persisted. Panic surged in Adrian's chest as the shadows seemed to close in around him. He bolted down the road, desperate to escape, but the further he ran, the more distorted the world around him became. The road stretched endlessly before him, and yet, no matter how fast he moved, he never seemed to get closer to the end. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The road was gone. The mist, the whispers, the shadows, all vanished. Adrian found himself standing alone in a vast, empty field, the sky above him now a deep, unnatural red. His heart raced in his chest as he looked around, searching for any sign of where he was. But there was nothing, only the suffocating silence. A voice whispered in his ear, as soft as a breath, "You can't leave." Adrian spun around, but there was no one there. And then he realized the truth. He had become one of them, the lost souls.